Guys. All right, so I have a message today, and this message hit me about over a year ago, and it's super simple. It's on love, and my first experience with the love of God, and I called it multiplication. If you guys know the parable of the talents, it's one of the parables that Jesus Christ talked about. It's the one where a master gave a bunch of talents to people, and one of them went and dug a hole and hid it in the ground. And you guys, does that sound familiar? We'll go over it later if it doesn't. But just to keep in your head, multiplication, and specifically multiplication of love for this topic. I'm going to start off with the story of when I was introduced to his love. And this was a little over a year ago, and I think I had just started. Did we start coming to this church at this time, Cassie? I don't know. It was a little over a year ago. It was very recently. And a little backstory, my mother married a very young Marine back in the day, and they had a child, and I was that baby. It was a shotgun wedding at Vegas. You know, they met each other, knew each other for, I don't know, a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, and got married. And then I popped out. And my mother's bloodline is kind of shambles. She grew up in orphanages and was tossed around as a kid. And then my dad's side is Freemasons, murderers from Scotland, and they were kicked out of their land and shipped over here. And so I got all kinds of nastiness in my blood, or I did. And anyways, they got married, and shortly thereafter, I was born, and my father struggled. I have to be very careful when I tell the story because I want to honor my father, because I want to live long and prosper, and I also want him to be saved. And but how do I start this? All right, I'll just do it. So I'm drawing a blank. It's weird. It's my first time preaching in the States. It's nerve-wracking. All right, so my dad was full of murderous rage, and a bunch of lunacy was going on in his head. It was passed down from his dad and the dad above him. And he would physically beat my mom, even when I was in her womb. I'd push her downstairs and stuff. And it got to the point where he decided he was going to kill her, and he was going to kill me when I was an infant. And luckily, my mom, something happened, something switched, and she ran and told the command that he was at, the squad of Marines, and they acted quickly. They put him in the loony bin, and I was then raised for the next, I don't know, half a year by just 20 different Marines that were living in the house, keeping us safe in case, he got out and, stuff happens. And eventually, after some time, my mom took me and moved away somewhere. And she was bouncing around states and trying to support me. And she ran into one of the Marines that lived with us. She ended up marrying him, and that's the guy who raised me. Awesome man. Very wise. He did 30-something years in the military and just retired recently, and he's a guy that I really look up to. He's very bold and very strong in the spirit. And anyways, my biological father, I haven't talked to him since my late 20s, early 30s. I messaged him on Facebook, and I let out all my hate and anger towards him through a text. I didn't know what mercy and forgiveness was then. I was kind of just throwing up on him. And then after the course of some time, we developed a relationship. It wasn't a father-son relationship. It was like an awkward, I got my blood in you, you got your blood in me, and weird stuff happened. We don't really need to talk about it, and we kind of love each other. Let's go fish. That was the relationship. And so this was a little over a year ago. I decided to go down to his house. He lives here in Arkansas, down in Arkansas. I won't tell you where, but he lives in Arkansas. And we went down there. We were going to go fishing, and I was going to spend the night. We were going to hang out. And at that time, I had a bunch of different thought processes, theologies, mindsets, whatever you want to call them, that I was stumbling over and I was wrestling with. Some of them were the doctrine of election and sovereignty. Are we the elect? Do we have free will? You can go the Arminian route or the Calvinist route, and I was going down both, and I could prove both in the Bible. And I was really confused. And one day I'd be a Calvinist, and the next day I'd be an Arminian, and Lee and Brandon know all about that. And then there was some other thoughts where I had a lot of good friends of mine that were deep into the Hebrew roots movement. And so they follow the 613 laws of the Old Testament. And I was trying to follow them, and I was getting really irritated because I couldn't. And a lot of them didn't make sense to me. I didn't know why there's so many laws, but the Bible said follow them, so I followed them. But then I started stumbling upon Romans and Galatians and Ephesians where I'm supposed to be led by the law and it's fulfilled. And so I was wrestling and I couldn't figure out which one I would do one day, do the other the next day. I was just wishy-washy. All kinds of different doctrines are going through my head. And to be honest, I was tortured. I didn't know which route to go. I didn't know how to lead my family. I was scared. And I went to go hang out with my dad. And the intent of me going to hang out with him was I wanted to preach the gospel to him and kind of slip it under the rug, see if he would bite it, So we were on the boat, and I was talking to him about deliverance, and he was eating it up. And he said, son, I'm infested with demons. They've been trying to kill me my whole life and other people. And I believe what you're talking about. It's true, and whatever this deliverance thing is, let's do it, boy. And I was, that was like an over an hour or two long conversation. So I was ecstatic. And the sun was setting. It was such a picturesque cinematic scene. The sun was setting. We're on the boat, and I had my shades on, and so did he. And he was starting to accept the gospel, and I was just crying. And I was like trying to do this and reel so he couldn't see. And I could tell he was getting emotional. So he's like, let's just hit this thing. Let's see how fast it can go. And so he just drove the boat, and we didn't know what to do. We're just trying not to cry in front of each other. Most of you dudes know what I'm talking about. It's awkward to cry in front of some guys, especially when you don't really know them. And I was so happy. This is the first time I ever broke out speaking and singing in tongues. You couldn't hear anything because his two-stroke engine behind was just screaming, and I was just lightly just singing in tongues. I was so happy. But there was a cloud that came over that ruined my atmosphere, my spirit, whatever it's called. It ruined that whole emotion that I was feeling. It was this black cloud. And this might sound dumb, but it's my story. I don't care. I had told him I agreed that I was going to smoke weed with him that night. And that's another mindset I was struggling with was, God gave it to us. I can smoke it, That makes me laugh more, it makes me love my wife and kids more, and there's really nothing wrong with it. But my spirit was catching something. It was darkness, and it ruined that moment. And the first thought that popped in my head was, I accepted I'm going to smoke with him. Well, whatever, I'm going to do it anyways, because I'm stubborn. So we went back to his house, and we both ended up smoking together. And he's a Freemason. He's a 32nd degree Freemason. He's worked his way both up the Scottish and the York Rite, if you guys know anything about that. And Freemasons, not all of them know what Freemasonry is, but there's a lot of satanic ritual in there. It's kind of like, not every Freemason is a Satanist, just like not every Christian understands the power and the authority of Jesus Christ that we're given. There's a lot of people in church that go to church, but you get what I'm saying? There's a lot of Freemasons that go to Freemason lodges, but they're not really Freemasons. Because it's a spiritual matter. It's not a physical matter. And I'm not going to dive into that. You can do your own research. Anyways, he's a 32nd degree. He hasn't reached his 33rd yet. And I found it interesting that I was about to be sacrificed when I was an infant. And luckily, I was taken from that. So we're sitting in his room, and I'm high. And he's sitting there, he's high as well, and we start talking, and the conversation gets very deep. We were talking about hunting animals. I like to hunt pigs. And he's like, he just changed the conversation to, yeah, I like hunting pigs too. I got a buddy here in town that skins animals and makes like lamps and stuff out of the skins. And I'm high, and I'm like, dude, you can't say that when I'm high. That's freaking me out, dude. and and it just got deeper and darker, and I got to a point where I was so up there in highness that my level of mental clarity was just insanely low. I did not have a stable mind. I did not have clear thoughts. And I was vulnerable. I was exposed, and it felt like I was trespassing somewhere I shouldn't be in the spirit, if that makes sense. And some stuff happened where he's like, well, since we're talking about skins, you want to see my lambskin? I was like, again, that's weird. What is your lambskin? And so he takes me into a room in his house, and it's like a study room. And he takes out this blue tube and unfolds this lambskin, and it's the apron that the first, second, and third degrees wear, and it has his dates, when he got his degrees, and has his name on it and the person that sponsored him. He's like, I want you to have this. And I could feel the blood in me, like kind of doing this, like something, there was a connection happening. And I said, no, I don't want it, man. And he picked up a ring, a mason ring. He's like, this was mine, it was your grandfather's, and it was your great-granddaddy's, and I want you to have it. And again, I felt something like nasty pulling me. And I was like, no, dude, I don't want this. And I start freaking out. My heart was pounding. And he kept offering me things, and he's like, you see that Bible over there? I got it in the lodge in Ethiopia, in a Freemason lodge. And I got that at this lodge, and I got that at this lodge. And as I was looking, everything in here was Freemason. Everything. It was an altar room. Everything had the square and compass and the G and everything on it. And my ancestors' lines were everywhere. And his plaques for 32nd degree was all over the place. And I was freaking out. And I said, hey, man, I don't want to be in this room anymore. I'm going to leave, and you're going to go first. It was very tense. It was very nasty. It was just dark. It was satanic. It was nasty, and I was on guard. I said, you're going to go first. And so he was like, all right, buddy. And he walked in front of me, and I walked behind him. I went and I sat on the couch. There's a lot more to the story that I'm going to leave out. But I was sitting there on the couch, and I was looking at him, and I could see he was like smirking like this. And then he would do this, like he was freaking out. And it was like, I've never seen it before. It was so weird. It was as if I was seeing a spiritual side or something that was in him, and then it would change to who he really was, and then it would change back. I was high. My testimony is ruined because I was high. Because everybody can just say, hey, dummy, you're not supposed to smoke weed. You know, of course. That's why you're seeing weird stuff. But what I'm about to tell you now, I will never forget for the rest of my life. It's life-changing. And this is when I was introduced to God's love and his deliverance and his mercy. And as I was sitting on the couch, his face was doing that weird contorted thing, and all of a sudden, if you've ever had sleep paralysis, my chest I couldn't breathe. It was deep, it was heavy. I couldn't suck in, I couldn't breathe out, I couldn't speak. I could move my eyes. It was about the only thing I could move. And I was starting to black out. It was too long, and I was literally sitting on the couch, and I was doing that. I was completely seized. And it was going on for what felt like 2 minutes. It was a long time. Without air, that's a long time. And all of a sudden, uncontrollably, I screamed, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I just screamed it. And that broke whatever was holding me. It just completely shattered its grip on me. And I breathed in. And then I couldn't stop saying it. I kept saying, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And I kept saying it and kept saying it. I said it probably about 15 times. And every time I said it, my body was contorting, eyes were rolling back in my head. And I remember I hit my head on the drywall, and I kicked the table, and I was completely out like that. And I was gone. No idea where I went. I was just completely gone. I don't know where I went or what happened, but all of a sudden there were bubbles of thoughts that came in front of me. And the first bubble was sovereignty or election or free will. And it said, hey, you're wrestling with this. You were on this one day, then you were on this the other day, but you didn't choose and you didn't get it right. You failed. That thought bubble would go away. Then the next thought bubble would come, and it would be like you're trying to follow the law. You didn't. You failed. But you're not supposed to follow the law. But you're supposed to. It was just confusing, and it said you failed. And it went by. The next bubble, the next bubble, the next bubble. And then the last bubble, I've never felt so deflated. You know how we're filled with spirit, with ruach, that means air? This last bubble, after it flew away, I felt like if there was any air left in my spirit, it was deflated. It just, and I was as low as I've ever been in my life. And this thought bubble, it was my wife and my daughters. And every time that I said something out of line to my wife, or I burst out of anger at my children, or I degraded them or put them down, or I wasn't patient with them, or I just blew up, I saw every single time I did that, every time. I heard it, I saw it, and it said, you failed. And that bubble went away. The next thing I knew, I was in the most widest room that I've ever seen in my life, the most purest white room. You couldn't see any corners. You know how you can see corners in the drywall? There were no corners in this room. It was just pure white, like it was snow. And the room never ended, but it was also so close and comforting and like tight to me. It was the weirdest thing. And I didn't see God, but I heard him say, the answer to everything is to love me. With all of your heart, with all of your strength, all of your soul, all of your mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself. The answer to all of your issues is love. And that's so simple. We know that. It's the greatest commandment in the Old Testament, greatest commandment in the New Testament. That's what we talk about all the time. But I'm a simple and a slow man, and I needed that. And as soon as he said that, like spirit, air, whatever, came back into me. And I left that room, and I was back in my body. I was still high, which sucked, but I was back in my body on the couch. And my dad looked at me, and he's like, what just happened? And I was like, I'm not going to explain that to him. Like, you want to turn on Netflix, watch a comedy or something, you know? And so he did. He turned on to Netflix, watched the comedy. I woke up in the morning, and I went home. And I was so heavy when I went home. I was so heavy for like a week. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I've never had a life-changing encounter or moment like that where I literally feel like I died. I went somewhere, and he showed me something, the most important message of my life, and then he put me back in my body. And he said, all right, go. And he never shamed me. He never condemned me. And I was thinking about it earlier, and it brought me to tears. Nicole had walked into the office earlier, and I was trying not to cry in front of her. She's like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, what's up? You know? And so check this out. You know, we're called to, if someone's naked, we're supposed to clothe them. If someone's hungry, you're supposed to give them food. If they're thirsty, you give them water, right? And we'll go over that in a minute with the parable. I was naked. I was hurt. I was shamed. I wonder what it felt like when Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden. They were removed from paradise and thrown out into the world. And what did they do? They looked down, they saw they were naked. And what did God do? He killed an animal, he skinned the animal, and then he wrapped them and gave them clothing. He covered them. And so I got a glimpse of what that felt like. My God's into cover-ups. Don't take that out of context. Listen to my story, right? My God is into covering me, covering my shame. So anyways, the next slide, that was a little heavy, so here's my friend Curtis. So my confirmation of love, when we were in Africa this last time, it's been on my mind since then. How do I love more? How do I love more? I'm a very hard man. I've always got a mean face on me. I'm always thinking about stuff. You know, it's true. I struggle with critically thinking, overthinking everything, and I'm trying to ask Jesus for his eyes of compassion and for his eyes of love, because I've found a secret in the kingdom. And so when we were in Africa, Curtis and I, we were sleeping in our little lodges. It's like hotel rooms before we went out to the bush. And I was feeling very gray and numb and dull and like, yeah, I'm just here to work. I was just, I don't know, I wasn't joyous. I wasn't happy. I didn't feel like I'm going to do missionary stuff, you know. I was depressed. I don't know why. I was just depressed. And I was laying in bed. It was like 3 in the morning, on the dot, 3 in the morning. And Jesus comes into my room. I see him, and he's dancing in circles. He's just dancing in circles. And I'm like, wait. Like, I'm still laying in bed. My eyes are closed, but I'm seeing him, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't. He's just dancing in circles. And he's like, you are in control of your joy. Put on a garment of praise. And I got up and I held him. And I was crying. I was just saying over and over again, like, you know me, you know me, you know me, you know me. Like, you know me. Oh, you know me. Oh, dude, it was so cool. And there's a couple of things he said to me, and one of them was, he said, I've anointed you specifically to preach on my love. And I think that's layman terms. For me being simple and slow, I think everybody's anointed to preach on his love. That's called the gospel. But he has to specifically tell me, hey, speak on his love. Talk about his love. Focus on his love. So that was my confirmation of love. And I remember saying, please go to Curtis. He's right over there. He's just go tickle his feet, something, go wake him up. And he said, okay. And it was 3:33 in the morning. And he left. And I remember 3:33 because I heard birds chirping outside. I was like, it's 3:33 and the sun's not up yet. That was cool. So the parable that I'd like to go over is the parable of the talents. And it is in Matthew 25. Okay. $14. All right. So this is a picture of what the kingdom of heaven looks like. Jesus Christ spoke to us in parables, kind of like riddles, because it's up to a king to search a matter out. If we want to search him and find him and figure out where his heart is, it takes us on a journey and we'll figure it out. But for people that don't have their ears open or that have a spirit of slumber, they're not going to find it. They're not going to search it out. So he spoke to a lot of people in parables, and there's probably a way deeper meaning than I understand. But that's how Kyle understands it. So the kingdom of heaven is like a man, and he's traveling far away. And before he traveled far away, he gathered all of his servants, and he delivered his goods to them. And he gave one person 5 talents. He gave another 2, and to one he only gave 1 talent. And he gave each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on the journey. The master went on the journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with other people and made another 5 talents. And likewise, the guy who received 2 talents, he went out and he made 2 more. But the one who received only 1 went out and dug into the ground, and he hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And so the master said, so he who had received the 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents. So the guy who had 5 talents, he went out, he multiplied it 5 more times. And And he said, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents, and look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. And the Lord said to him, well done, you good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received only 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid and went and hid your talents into the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right, so he had 3 dudes. He gave one guy 5 talents. He multiplied it by 5. He gave another guy 2 talents, and he multiplied that by 2. And he gave another guy 1, and he didn't multiply it. He went and he dug and he hid it. Then the master came, and he was super stoked with the 2 dudes that multiplied it. But to the one that didn't multiply it, he said, get out of here. You go into the darkness, and you're going to, whimper and gnash your teeth and be angry. Because you were wicked, you were unfaithful with what I handed to you. So this part's pretty cool. It's a little scary here. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, so when Jesus Christ comes back, the second coming, and all the holy angels with him, he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from the other, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats, and he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left hand. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you and from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. And then they all said to him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? When were you thirsty? When did we give you a drink? When were we naked and you clothed us? And he said, assuredly, I say to you, and as much as you did it to one of the least of my brothers, you did it to me. Then he will say to those on the left hands, these are the unfaithful, wicked servants, the goats, not the sheep. Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. And they all answered him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry? When did we see you thirsty, naked, or in prison, and not minister to you? Then he answered them and said, assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So what is a talent? Is it money? Because in the parable, in the physical it is. And to us, it can be. Multiplication of money is good. It's called blessings. Talents could also be a gift that's given to us. And what do we call a gift from God? It's grace. Grace means gift. It's a gift from God. And every single person in this church has a certain grace that they've been given from God. Some don't have others. Some have more, some have less. But we're all supposed to use these grace, these gifts, these talents to build up the church of Christ. And so in Romans 12, 6 through 8, I did a blasphemous thing and I changed it to having talents. It says having a gift, but I changed it to having talents to push the point. Having talents differing according to what has been given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion to our faith. There's some of us in here that are prophets, and they prophesy in proportion to their faith. Aaron and Miriam. That's a grace that's been given to you guys. That's a beautiful grace. Ministry, let us use it in our ministering. Curtis, Bertha, Jamie, everyone else who slaves away, the Jenkins, they're ministering. That's a talent that's been given to you. That's what you exceed in. He who teaches in teaching, Richie, a bunch of you other younger men, younger women. He who exhorts in exhortation, he who gives with liberality. There's a gift of giving, Kale. I've never seen a man that gives so much. I've never seen a man that pours so much into a town with his own money and pour into other people's lives with his own money. He does it with liberality. He understands his gift, and he multiplies it. He who leads with diligence. That's Pastor Craig, our bishop, our apostle, our covering. Diligence, if you lead with diligence, it's taking into captive every single thing that's coming at you, taking into captive every single thing, all of your problems, and trying to sift through and figure out how to lead you in the best way with all mercy, with all care, with all diligence. And that's what our pastor does. That's a grace he has, and he's multiplying it to all of us. And he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. I don't want to tear myself down too much because when Jesus came into my room that night, and he was just jumping around and spinning in circles and dancing, I don't deserve that, right? And neither do you. But he's showing me mercy with all cheerfulness. And man, he pumped me up. And he put joy back into my life so that I could go out and tell these Africans more about who this Jesus is and what this love is. That's mercy with cheerfulness. And so if you don't know what your talent is, or what your grace is, or what your gift is, with a foundation of love, I encourage you to fast a couple days, pray about it, and may God give you dreams and unlock prophecies from the prophets in our house or from other people or somebody else that knows their grace, their gift. May God give them words to unlock what your talent is, to show you what your talent is. If you can examine your own heart and run after God's heart. Sometimes I view God has a legitimate heart, and when I'm praying, I'll run up and I'll run inside of his chest, and I'll just start running circles, running through all the valves. I'm trying to figure out who he is, where he's at, what does he think about this, how does he see this person? And it's transforming the way I think. He's giving me eyes of compassion. And a lot of us get stuck in, we see people and we want to get them free so bad. We're like, that's a Jezebel, or that's pride, or oh man, he needs to change this. And it's slowly I'm changing into, I'm looking for the Jesus in my brothers and sisters, and then I'm looking for the gifts that haven't been activated in people who aren't my brothers and sisters. So, and this also goes in part to, man, love is the foundation for everything. Get away from me, for I never knew you. But Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not cast out demons in your name? Did we not speak tongues of angels in your name? He says, get away from me, I never knew you. We love people. When you begin to have eyes of compassion for other people, you don't really care about prophecies or speaking in tongues or all the cool stuff that some of us want to do. That stuff goes away. When you begin to look into people's souls and try to build them up and pray for them and fast for them and do everything you can for them, you'll find yourself, ooh, I just prophesied. I just built him up. Or you start doing the things that you once that I once coveted. I wanted so bad to be a prophet, and I wanted so bad to be on stage and to prophesy over people. But the more that's self-seeking, that's selfishness. The more that I pursue God's love, the less I care about that. And the more I pursue his love, the more I find myself doing that. Because our foundation is in love. And so I encourage you guys, I don't know if I'm over time or not. So I encourage you guys, maybe something that might help if you're trying to figure out what your talent is in a foundation of love. When you look at somebody, try to see where they're going to be in the future. Where do they fit into the church? When you look at somebody and they act out in anger or pride or they're gay or they're doing drugs or whatever that kind of makes us go like this a little bit, that kind of kicks our religious spirit in. You know what I'm talking about. What happened to that person? Try to think about what happened. Why is he acting that way? He wasn't just born out of the womb acting like that, unless it's a generational curse, but we're not going down that rabbit hole. Ask Jesus to give you his eyes of compassion. If you notice, if you go back into the Gospels, before he would heal somebody's eyes or before he would raise the dead or, some of the crazy stuff he did, it said, and then compassion was with him, or he was moved with compassion, or he saw this person and he was with compassion. What is this compassion? He was with it, it was in it, he was moved by it. If that's a spirit, I want it. If that's a spirit of God, I don't know how it works, but I know that's part of his love. And I know that miracles and changing of the world and edification of the church and uplifting of the brothers and sisters comes from love. And so if that's part of love, Jesus, give me eyes of compassion. And so that's my word for the church. It's a multiplication of love. And with that, I think I'm going to close in prayer. And Nicole, I don't know how to close this out. The first time I ever preached was in Africa, and Craig knocked it out of the park. Curtis knocked it out of the park. I went up there, I was shaking and preaching and declaring and screaming, and I was telling the story, and I ended it, and I said, "And listen with your ears." Dude, it was so awkward. It was awkward. Father, I praise you. I bless you. I love you. You are my king, and you are the king of this house. And I pray that you give your eyes of compassion to the members of this church, and that you expose and make our talents manifest so that we can edify and uplift, so that we can encourage, that we can exhort. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for clothing us. I pray that you highlight people in our lives as we walk out, to go clothe them, to go feed them, both physically and spiritually. There is no one like you, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, play music.